Welcome back to Nadya's Identity Files. Already a very intriguing conversation that we're having so far, for sure. And now I want to delve into stem cell research and regenerative medicine because I think that there's such a deep connection there with identity. And I was even going into Google Scholar, and I found some fascinating papers correlating identity to stem cell research. I kind of bookmarked some of those. I'll go back and read them later.
And more, we're getting a lot of fascinating data about cellular biology and identity and its connection to who we are. Because, and that part of my research have dug into that. When I was working on my PhD work, I was studying the mechanisms by which stem cells give to the cells around them this ability to become younger on the molecular level and how they do that. And it turns out that we as molecular creatures are very dynamic creatures. We're constantly changing on cellular level. The genetic makeup that we are born with is 99% identical between all people, but this dynamic interaction with our environment, with surrounding cells, with experiences even, and with lifestyle shapes who we are, how we live, and even how long we live. Now I read more and more esoteric scientific literature about how even our thoughts and outlook on life can shape our molecular makeup. Mm-hmm. And that makes sense in the context of stem cells being able to share their ability to stay forever young with the rest of our cells.
And I think that's why adopting a very strong spiritual practice in addition to eating super clean, nutritious foods when a person is diagnosed with cancer is so important, because you're trying to regenerate the healthy cells.
And just to stay resilient, that the journey, unfortunately, the journey through cancer doesn't always lead to a good outcome, but the way that you go through it and the strength that you need to fight this horrible disease definitely needs replenishing, needs spiritual connection, and just needs support from physical, emotional, spiritual perspective. And if you give yourself that support, that love, and allow yourself to be kind to yourself, that will alone give you strength enough to continue the journey forward and the strength to stick to life and fight.
Can you talk a little bit about how your research has contributed to your various, medical applications in surgery?
Well, I was actually very, very lucky. I witnessed the first, as a resident and a PhD student at UCLA, I witnessed the very first human stem cell transplant into the retina.
Wow.
And that was fascinating. I was working on my stem cell research in the lab. I learned more and more about how stem cells can make adult already differentiated cells, which means they've already determined their fate, turn their fate backwards into a younger version of themselves. And then boom, there comes a stem cell trial, and we're witnessing it. There were some very promising things coming out of it. We're still in the works of interpreting the data from that trial, but the first human stem cells were transplanted into the eyes in hopes of making people who lost their central vision see again. And these people, some of them started being able to read. Granted, they were large letters, but there was a huge impact.
Wow.
For someone who cannot see, to be able to see something is a big deal.
And where did those cells come from? Do they need to come from another eye, like a organ donor? Like, where do they come from?
Well, nowadays there's a lot of options. As we're advancing more and more in the science realm, there's a lot of options. Before, it would be ideal if they would come from an embryonic stem cell, from embryos that were not, for some reason or another, being able to be implanted. But nowadays, there's more options. Now, from Japan came an absolutely brilliant study that has taught us to take an adult cell, such as a skin cell or a fat cell, and turn it into your own, very own stem cell.
Wow.
So that can be a huge contribution to your stem cell pool. We can grow it in a test tube, we can collect whatever you need, and hopefully eventually, and I'd predict within the next 10-15 years, we'll have a much better handle on being able to harvest our own stem cells and expand them to give us as many cells as we need for therapies.
What do you think about those who are fearful of this type of biotechnology, like those who imagine like this future dystopian world where we're being replicated
Cloned.
by, yes.
I hear a lot of that, and honestly, people are always very resistant. Whenever a new discovery comes, especially if it's this groundbreaking, this revolutionary, there's huge resistance. In the Middle Ages, they burned them at the stake and called them witches. Later, every time, even the theory of relativity met huge resistance, but nonetheless, Einstein prevails. So every great discovery will meet a huge wall that they'll need to break through.
Right.
But I think the promise of, and I don't want to say eternal youth, but the promise of much prolonged youth, much prolonged function is so great, and there's so many reasons to believe it'll happen, that we just need to brace ourselves and walk forward and embrace this new ability to stay functional, to stay productive, and to just enjoy life. Why not?
And is there a recommended age for, say somebody wants to preserve themselves, like wants to revert back to looking younger at 40 years old? Many people today, as I was talking about earlier, in the very superficial sense, they'll get a Botox injection or they'll get a facelift or whatever. And when I say superficial, that's not a judgment. I'm just saying like it's very surface level. It's not something that's going into the body in a deep way. So how would somebody, if they wanted to look 5 years younger, how would one introduce do that via stem cells?
And at this point, we're already seeing some things being integrated clinically for that. And to shun the superficial, I would have to be the biggest hypocrite. I almost became an eye plastic surgeon. I was for a long time considering doing that because I think it's a lot of fun, and you do reconstructive things too. And it was just
interesting.
I have actually learned from very fantastic mentors, probably one of the best ones in the world, how to do Botox, how to do Restylane, how to do these fillers. So I do have the skill because I think it's great. I think that inside and out youth is the most important. You have to feel young. To feel young, you have to be healthy. But our society still, whenever we meet a person, the first thing we see is what we see. And age is a stigma. And especially with women, I feel it's a big deal. Not just in Hollywood, but anywhere. We are met by how we look. And for a woman, her appearance is integrated into her identity, into her inner core. So I think it's absolutely justified, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
I definitely don't think there's anything wrong with it. And again, when I said superficial, it's not a judgment. It's more like when I was looking at the difference between a stem cell, introducing stem cells to a body versus
a toxin.
A toxin, like it's very much, it's just going very surface level. At least that's my understanding of it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's different procedures.
So now we're just discovering the tip of that iceberg. For now, what people do is called platelet-reduced plasma vampire facelift, where we take the blood from the person themselves, we spin it down to isolate a fraction that may contain some stem cell factors, and actually my PhD explains why that has to work. And then we infuse it back into the facial tissues in order to give our own natural ability to regenerate a little boost. And I think as we go further and further, there will be so many more options that will be effective. And I would probably start doing it whenever inside you feel, for me, the cosmetic aspect of medicine is highly linked to confidence, highly linked to how you feel about yourself. And I think it's okay to do that when you feel that you want to get that little zinger.
Right. And for sure, everybody's different, but you mentioned stigma, I think to some degree, actually to a very large degree, that stigma needs to be turned on its head rather than us, feel obligated to conform to that stigma, which is being perpetuated by a patriarchal
Very true.
system.
Very true. But I think a combination, it's not just how you look, it's more how you feel. Sometimes, I've seen that in cosmetic practices. An absolutely gorgeous person comes into the office and they don't really need anything, but somehow just a little here and there that probably doesn't have very much impact gives them mentally an idea that I had this problem, I fixed it, and now I'm confident that I'm this, and they project a different confidence than what they walk out. So I think for the confidence type of aspect of it, it's definitely okay.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm sporting an airbrush tan because I feel better with a little bit of extra color on my face. Everyone is a bit different, but I do think that it's important as a society that we don't shun people or make people feel like looking this way it's not good. This is not aesthetically okay. We're all, meant to conform and maintain this X look.
I
think
agree
that's
with you.
Very
I
problematic.
absolutely agree with you, and it causes problems. It imposes a stereotype on young girls and on young boys. It causes all sorts of health issues, confidence issues. It's just not the way to value people. Definitely.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, it can be very objectifying, and some
Very
of
much
that
so.
can ultimately become self-imposed because we're then conditioned to kind of believe certain things about ourselves. And what we should be looking like.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of a double-edged sword, but I think just like with anything else, you kind of have to figure out what works best for you.
Definitely. And I'm hoping that in the future, the way it's going to be transformed is instead of focusing on looks, we will focus on being healthy. Now I see a huge shift from being physically perfect to being physically healthy. People are promoting healthy lifestyle, and I'm really excited to be in California because it's such a state of eternal sunshine, eternal happiness, and health. And people are really focused on connecting with their inner kind of core and keeping a healthy lifestyle, keeping a spiritually and physically healthy shape. I think that that's the important part, and that's what's going to really propel our aging into the future. We will age much more gracefully if we subscribe to a healthy lifestyle, if we eat clean, if we exercise, and with the help from a little stem cell therapy here and there.
Yeah, I'm very interested in the vampire facial.
It's an interesting concept. Now I think there's still a lot of kinks to be worked out because right now it's just the beginning stages. But as we go along the time-space continuum, I think there will be a lot more coming out. Not just for the cosmetics, but for joints, for liver, for hopefully eventually for pancreas and diabetes.
Doesn't the liver regenerate very quickly on its own?
It has the potential capacity, and unless it's very badly damaged, it does that. But unfortunately, with the toxin out in the environment and in the society, it sometimes takes that hit where it cannot do its own. And maybe with stem cells in the future, we'll be able to give it a little boost as well.
Maybe we can use stem cells to give the environment a boost.
That would be nice.
Right?
That would be nice.
Well, when we come back, we're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, I want to dig more into the relationship of identity with all of these issues, including how your work has contributed to your own identity and the relationship between your different unique identities to your work. We'll be back.
That'll be fun.